All right, so something that I noticed when I was going back through your guys' graded work and writing comments on everything is that I think that you might have missed something, or I just might not have explained it well enough. So what I'm going to do really quick is the first problem from that worksheet that I had you guys do today. So that was number 1, and the problem was negative 4x plus y minus 6z equals 23, 3x minus 5y minus z equals negative 2, and 3x minus 6y plus z equals negative 5. So you guys look like you did a really good job when you were creating your matrices to solve these problems. So that was like the good part that I was really happy about. But then it kind of went downhill from there. So we made our coefficient matrix from the coefficients in front of all of our different variables. So that was negative 4, 3, 3, 4, negative 5, negative 6, and then negative 6, negative 1, and 1 for the coefficient matrix. And then our second matrix had our variables in it. So that was x, y, and z. And then we set that equal to the last matrix, which was a 3 by 1, and that was just our like answer matrix. So it looked like everybody got to this part, but then we kind of got confused on where to go. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to name my coefficient matrix. I'm going to name this A. And then I'm going to name my variable matrix X. And that's going to equal my answer matrix, which I'm going to call B. So before I move on, I just want to talk about what the, excuse me. I want to talk about what the order of each of these matrices are. So we have a 3 by 3 matrix in my first one. My second one is a 3 by 1, and that equals a 3 by 1 matrix. So remember when we were doing these and we were doing that matrix multiplication, that these two numbers had to be the same when we were multiplying, so that checks out. So now I want to talk about what happens when we go ahead and multiply by the inverse matrix on both sides. So when we multiply by the inverse matrix on both sides, we get something that looks like this. I know I'm switching between colors a lot. It's just so that you guys can see the difference in each one and what I'm doing. So now let's talk about what kind of matrices we have here. And we have to make sure that we can multiply them. So my first one is a 3 by 3. That's my inverse matrix, right? Because the inverse and the original matrix are going to be the same size. So I have 3 by 3s being multiplied together. And then that variable matrix isn't going to change. It's still a 3 by 1. And that's still going to equal, this time it's a little bit different. I'm multiplying a 3 by 3 by a 3 by 1. So this is why this order matters. So if I checked myself, I'd have to go back through here and say, okay, do these two match? Yes, perfect, awesome. Do these two match? Yes, perfect, awesome. Do these two match? Yes, perfect, awesome. What I saw a lot of you guys doing was you got your inverse matrix times your original, times the variable matrix. But when we got over to this side, you tried to do the 3 by 1 matrix. So that's your B times your inverse matrix, which is a 3 by 3. And if you notice what happens here, if you look at this part, these two numbers are not the same. That means we cannot multiply those two together. So that's why you guys were getting those decimal answers. So when we're doing something like this, we just want to make sure that we're doing it like this. So that this is that key part that I wanted to make everyone aware of. when you go back and multiply your things together, it needs to be your inverse matrix times that answer matrix. Inverse has to come first always. So I'm going to go into my online calculator here, and I'm just going to redo these matrices for you on here. So the first matrix that I'm going to do is my 3 by 3 matrix that I made up. That's that coefficient matrix that I wrote. I'll get the colors back out. That's this matrix right here. That's this one that I'm talking about right now. So I'm going to enter that one into my calculator. So my first entry was a -4, and then a 1, and then a -6. My second was a 3, a -5, and a -1. And my third row had 3, -6, and 1 in it. So I need to find the inverse of this matrix so that I can end up multiplying by it on both sides. So I'm going to plug that in. And this is where I get those funky decimals. So this matrix right here, if I could highlight it, I wish I could. But this matrix that just popped up over on the right side, that is my inverse matrix. So that is this teal color right here. And that's what I'm going to multiply. So when I go to do my multiplication from this right side, so when I go to do what I've highlighted in this pink box here, I'm going to use that matrix that I just found. So the one with all these decimals over here on the right, I'm going to click that so that it brings it down. And I'm going to do this times my B. So times that red B. And that red B represents this matrix in blue. So I'm going to multiply what I just had here. I'm going to take this guy and I'm going to multiply it by that matrix, which is a 3 by 1 matrix. And it's made up of 23, -2, and -5. So when I do this and I click enter, I should get -3, -1, and -2. I know it's like -3 point, all those zeros, and then a 1. But if we're using our rounding techniques and rounding to the nearest tenth, that would make it a solid -3. So my answer for this matrix should have been that my x variable equaled -3. My y variable, so that's my second entry here, my y variable equaled -1. And my z variable equaled, I think that was -2 there. So please, if you have questions about this, this is what we should have ended up with, this green box over here. If you have questions about any of that, please feel free to ask me. I am going to upload my solutions, but I felt the need to emphasize that the inverse matrix has to come before that B matrix that you build. So the inverse matrix always comes first, because if it doesn't, then we get this guy right here, which cannot happen. If this was too confusing for you and you need to ask me a question face to face, please message me and let me know. I'm going to do a live video today just so that you guys have an opportunity to ask me questions, and I will make it just for Algebra 2 kids. So I hope that this helped you understand a little bit better